So the very first thing we want to do is to raise the vehicle up, and to do that we're obviously going to need a jack, but a jack is only a lifting device. It's not designed to, even though you see people do it all the time, it's not designed to hold the vehicle for extended periods of time. It's designed to lift it, and then you're going to want some jack stands to put under it to actually support it and hold it up. The jack, it's not safe to have it under there, because if one of those seals fails and the car comes down, it's not a good day. So I'm going to put the jack under there. I got this subframe bolt. This whole corner is a good spot. All right, a little more. And really, I only need it high enough where my wheel can spin freely so I can take the tire off. So now that I have it up, I can go ahead and raise this jack stand up a little bit and put it right there. These lug nuts take a 19mm. You can all do this by hand, but the power tools are just going to speed up the process. I suddenly just got hungry. So after you take the tire off, what we're going to do is we're going to shove it right under the frame over there. So if anything here fails, the car falls on the tire, and not only does that prevent damage to the vehicle, but it also prevents injury to us. If the car were to come down, we're not going to be trapped underneath it right down here. That's just an extra layer of protection. I'm going to lower this a little bit. Just make sure it's straight. All right. So it's on the jack stand. This is taking the weight of it, but the jack is still under there just in case. More or less, there are 4 bolts or 3 bolts on top depending on your style. There's the sway bar link, which has a bolt here. There's 2 bolts here, and then there's usually a brake line or an ABS line or something routed into there, and that's it. So what we're going to do first is I like to disconnect everything down here first, and then I go up top, because if I go up top first and then do this, it wants to fall on me because nothing up there is holding it. So this has a ball joint on the back side of it, and if I were to just take a socket and try to remove that, it's just going to spin back there and it's going to be impossible to remove. So what we have to do is we have to take something like a pry bar and put it behind here and actually put tension on it so we can pinch this against its mount here, and then we can actually take the bolt off. So if I don't have any tension on there, it's just going to spin forever. So I need to apply pressure so I can hold it, and then it comes off. Sometimes that's easier said than done. They can be pretty rusted. It's a good idea to replace your sway bar links if you're doing your struts anyway. But even though the strut looks new, and it's been in here for about a week, this one started leaking, and that's the reason I'm replacing it. I did the other one already, so these are both new in front, and when you do struts, do both at the same time. So now that this is off, this little piece right here for the sensor just comes off with a little rubber deal there, and now we can take the 2 main strut bolts off down here. So oftentimes these are basically slotted in there, so you want to take the nut off on the nut side, and then you can just pound them out with a hammer and they'll pop out. But like I was saying before, we can actually just pound these out just like that, and you can see they have this knurling around here so it can go into there and not spin, and then you can tighten the nut down on the other side. This should be a deep well socket, but I don't have one with me right now, but that's okay. Everything in your suspension geometry moves a little bit, so on many styles of struts and many vehicles, it's a good idea to go ahead and get an alignment after this. So we'll pound the second one out, make sure to hold this wire out of the way so you don't accidentally hit it. And sometimes you gotta pull and jiggle it a little bit, and there's the second one. So I'm just actually gonna put these nuts back on these bolts so I know they go together and I don't lose them. So everything down here is disconnected. You can see how quick and simple that was. We have the 2 bolts here, we have the cable, and we have the strut bolt. So now we go up top and do the 4 bolts up there. So up here we have 4 bolts on this particular style that hold the top on. This is just a little rubber cap that you don't really want to lose. But I'm going to loosen up all 4 of these, but I'm going to take off 3 of these, and then I'm going to have the 4th one just loose. So then when I can go underneath, as I can grab the whole strut with one hand and reach up here and just take off that nut so I can pull it out from the bottom. Struts do usually come with new nuts for the top here, and it's a good idea to go ahead and use those because they're usually a special style of nut that's kind of like a locking nut. These ones are actually nylon locking nuts, and they have a washer built in, so these are actually pretty good nuts. So I'm going to get this one almost all the way out of here so I can just spin it off with my finger. I'm going to go down below and actually remove it. So I'm going to come down here and just remove that last one by hand. Just make sure that nut is off of there. There it is. Get it up there. And then down here to grab this and kind of fish it out of here. So there is the old one, and we can see some fluid up here where it was leaking out of that seal. And the installation process is more or less exactly the same, just in the reverse order. So let me go ahead and grab that. Keep these in the box. Don't destroy the box when you get them, because there's often money you can get back as a core charge. Take both of your parts, new and old, and visually inspect them. Make sure you got the right side, everything lines up. And it looks good, looks fine. Tabs and everything are in the right places. It's not the passenger side on accident or anything. This old one, we're going to put it back in the box, and we're going to return it and get a little money back on a core charge, because they actually rebuild these things and then sell them to somebody else as refurbished. So this part is definitely helpful if you have a friend with you to help hold. What I have to do now is fish this thing up and line it up through the holes up there, and then also put a nut on top of it so I can hold it up there. And then this thing I'm just going to put off to the side over here, just kind of get that out of the way. These are shot. I'm going to have to replace these. But we're doing a strut right now, so that's what our focus is. So it helps to kind of put it in between other suspension components and kind of mock it up into place a little bit. And then I can look up here and figure out where the holes are so I can line this thing up. Come on. Yep, okay. Now that I have it up there, I'm gonna hold it with my hand, use this area over here as a little extra leverage, and then simply just hand thread a nut on top. Basically, what we're gonna do is we're gonna line everything up down here. We have this sway bar link, which we're not gonna worry about right now because we'll deal with that in a second. We have the 2 bolts down here that can line up. This actually will rotate a little bit so you can get everything into position. And once it's straight in there, we can take our jack under the ball joint down here. You can see that. We don't want to put the jack on the rim or on the rotor. We want to put it on the ball joint down there and then raise the suspension up a little bit so we can get everything in here to line up. We want these holes to line up. And I find it's actually easier to line up the bottom one first because then it rotates a little bit better to get that top one in. It's hard to do this while trying to give you guys a good camera angle. Now you want to be careful with this because if you don't actually have it lined up when you're tapping it through, you could damage the threads. And then when I tap these things in and they actually get all the way in there, you'll hear the tone change. So listen for the tone to change and you know it's seated. Hear that? Then you know it's good. And then we can tighten these up. And then the reason we have the jack under the ball joint is because this sway bar link is clearly never going to line up with that unless the strut is compressed. So make sure we're under that ball joint and not on the rotor. You do not want to put it on the rotor, you could damage it. And then we can compress this a little bit and it'll start going up. There we go. So now that we have the strut lined up, or with the sway bar link, we can put this bolt in. But again, it's not going to really want to tighten down. If we can see that back end there. See how it's just spinning? And it's never going to tighten, so we need to put pressure on that again in order to tighten it down, which means I will need probably this socket, yep, and then the pry bar again. So I just need to put it behind there and press it into its place. And then we're good on that. So that's lined up now. Ideally, like I said before, sway bar links should be replaced when you do struts. Might need to be replaced anyway. I'll do that at a different time. This cable can go back on here. If it's not a cable like this, oftentimes there's a little 10mm bolt on a bracket for like a flex hose line or something similar. After that, we can go ahead and tighten these up. Now there is an actual torque spec for all of this stuff, and if you're not familiar with doing these often, you should probably, just for safety's sake, refer to that. Tighten these up basically as much as I can by hand with this small 1/2-inch ratchet. And I'm using the smaller one because I have more movement down at this lower bolt. And now I can come over here to my large one to actually get the leverage to get it as tight as I want it. All right, those are as tight as I want them. Now we can go up top and do the 4 bolts up top. To get them snug, there's no particular order, but to actually tighten them down for the final tightening, you want to do a crisscross pattern just to make sure everything is even. Okay, those are all tight. So the last thing we need to do is put the tire back on, which means to slowly let this down. Then I'm going to put it back to where it was, just so we have the security. And we need to use it to take the jack stand out anyway. When you put lug nuts on, always start them by hand. There we go. You never want to cross thread them. And it's very easy to do that if you're using an impact gun to start them. More or less seat them with the impact, so I can basically skip that whole part. Take the jack stand out. Lower the car back down, and then we can tighten these up by hand. So I know they're good. We're going to go in a star pattern. Again, if you haven't done a zillion tires like I have, use a torque wrench, so you know exactly how tight you're getting. But once you do a couple, you can kind of get the feel for how tight they should be. And then go in a star pattern a couple of times, even after you think you have them tight, because tightening one down may loosen another. So it's good. I know it's good. And now all we really have to do is just clean up tools and call it a day.